afternoon, everybody. This is Rich Sutter in the zone with my ride along Pete Coles. We're having a Friday afternoon shoot today, a little bit different. I can assure you everybody showed up sober, but the weather outside in New England is absolutely fabulous right now. The last couple of days have been absolutely gorgeous here. And the only thing I can promise you this, Pete, after this, is there's at least 9 holes in my future somewhere here on a local golf course. The weather's just so beautiful, just so fantastic. It's amazing to be in New England at this time of year. Also to be in the studio with my friend Pete, because today, the show, after wrapping up our NCAA season, now we are in a recalibration. Now we're going to shift the focus into the NBA season, into the NBA playoffs. And as you move from the NCAA tournament, if you're a basketball fan, this time of year sets up just so beautifully for you, because you just went through the NCAA tournament, you filled out your bracket, you had some March Madness. It was absolutely exhilarating tournament in 23. And the regular season in 23 was also a very strong and exciting season for NCAA basketball. We saw a number of different coaching changes. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the show as well. But what we did talk about there also is we did give a grade, Pete. We gave a grade to the coaching changes. This year we gave it a 2.3. I think the more startling fact out of that is that over 50 jobs changed hands in Division I this year alone. And out of the possible 363 total jobs, that number's pretty high. And there's some things that I think can be done in order to make that number a little bit lower each year. But 53, 54 jobs on an average year, and that's about average. It goes somewhere in the 40s and 50s. That's about average. That's just a little too high right now for me. I'd like to see us get that number down a little bit. But it was a great season. It was a fabulous, fabulous end to the season with the UConn Huskies taking home the title. But now we're going to switch into the NBA, Pete. It's NBA playoff season. And before we get into that, we'd like to talk about a couple of awards that we have to hand out here today in the studio. And in the Feed 'em Fish section, we're going to declare our own MVP. We are going to declare our own Rookie of the Year. And we're going to give those awards out today. So the Most Valuable Player Award in the NBA is something that's often bandied about. I think we saw J.J. Redick and some other people get into it. Stephen A. Smith, Kendrick Perkins got into it a little bit. Their slant on it was a little bit different than the one I want to take today. But in the NBA selection process, when selecting a best player in basketball, it's a very, very difficult, and it's also a nuanced process. When I go out and say Larry Bird was the greatest basketball player of all time, there's some different facts that you can back that up with, but it's nuanced. Some people will believe Michael Jordan is the greatest player. Some people believe LeBron James. Some people like Kobe Bryant. It's nuanced. And so we say that right from the very, very beginning. So in our MVP discussion this year, we expect that everybody will have some different takes on different things. How I look at a player, what I look for in a player with a little bit of a coaching background, with a basketball background that goes back a little bit of time, can be completely different than what somebody else might be looking at in a player, what somebody else might say, that's an MVP season. And I think what we have to discuss just for a quick second today is the subjectivity of valuable. What does valuable mean? And the subjectivity of valuable. It means, do you score the most points? Do you grab the most rebounds? Are you the most unselfish player on the floor? Are you the greatest team guy in the locker room? Are all those things considerations that we throw into this? Then, as you see, the more variables that we throw into it, the more nuanced the discussion actually becomes. And so as we sit here today and we look at the NBA season, there was some great discussion around the big man from the Denver Nuggets, Jokic, and Joel Embiid, who's from the 76ers, and they have had amazing, amazing seasons. I believe Jokic is averaging a triple-double for the season.
Holy cow.
Which hasn't been done in a very, very long time. I wish we had fact checkers here. Sometimes that could go in.
Sometimes we need a staff.
And check to see exactly what I'm doing here. But I think that holds up pretty good. And I think Embiid is carrying the 76ers. And without him, the 76ers would be in last place as opposed to third place where they are right now. And so I think that is another take on valuable. Where would the team be if this player wasn't there? And so with that those two players in discussion, the discussion centered around those two players, but I think they missed. The discussion was riveting, and it was very, very profound. But I think they missed a point in that I think they picked the wrong guys this year. Although Jokic has had an amazing season, I would like to see Jason Tatum from the Boston Celtics be considered in that consideration, in that conversation, because he has had an amazing season. And when I look at a basketball player, I don't know in the NBA right now if you can find a more complete basketball player than Jason Tatum. He's 6'9". He can shoot the three. He handles the ball. He passes the ball. And I think if you look on the other side of the spectrum, on the defensive side, one of the reasons the Celtics have been as successful as they are is because Brad Stevens brought his defensive system with him when he came in as a coach and now as a general manager. It survived after him. And the Celtics have played incredible defense over the last couple of years. And Jason Tatum's taken the other team's best guy out every single night. So he's a gentleman that I want to put into that conversation. Embiid has had an amazing season. Jokic, an amazing season. But they're number two. They're number two in the overall Eastern Conference. And again, if you took Jason Tatum off the Celtics, where are they? And I think that is a value argument that you can make there. And I think he's very, very worthy of consideration. And he's not getting any right now, which is surprising to me.
And the bigger question, I know that there's talk that he might not be here next year. So what are the Celtics without him?
Let's hope we don't find out for those great fans in Boston.
Yeah.
I think you're seeing a little bit more of players leaning toward a legacy also in that situation too, where players aren't as excited. The great players aren't excited to move around as much. They like to bring other players in with them. And that's something in the NBA that's come of late, is where players start to coagulate with their friends and their other players that they think are great players in order to form that dream team. Some of that's been going on, obviously, and I think it's an interesting way that the league forms out sometimes. But for right now, the other gentleman I'd like to see in the MVP discussion, I can't believe he's not in there. And if it was up to me, I think this gentleman would be clear, and I'm going to murder his last name, I'm sure, but it's a Giannis Antetokounmpo from the Bucks. They're number one in the Eastern Conference. He's an unbelievable athlete on the basketball court, virtually unstoppable when he gets going.
Are they holding off on him because I think he's already won it, hasn't he? Did he win it last year?
He has. He might be 2-time in a row.
Okay.
But I just think if you've done it, it's like Ty Cobb said, it ain't bragging if you've done it. And so if he's 3rd time in a row and 4th time in a row, then he should be the MVP every time. And
Right.
I think, again, where are the Bucks without him? And I think that's an interesting conversation. But the piece of it that's most intriguing to me is that the NBA has done a little bit of a flip in terms of the older players that used to dominate the league of LeBron James, Kevin Durant, and other players of that ilk are not in the consideration for the MVP this year. And one of the considerations there is that the younger players in the league have absolutely taken over and dominated the league. If you look at John Morant from the Grizzlies, he's another person who should be getting consideration for MVP. He's an unbelievable athlete and has a computer basketball mind where his reads are just so clean and his reads are just so pure. And so I think that he would be somebody else in consideration. But when you look at Devin Booker out in Phoenix, you look at a lot of the OKC has Shai Gilgeous. When you look at all of the really, really talented players in the league right now, they're all very, very young. And that's promising for the NBA. But at the same time, that's caused a little bit of a flip, and we're going to look at that right now as we go in and we start to discuss the NBA playoff format, how it's set up right now, what exactly they're doing with it. You're going to see, especially in the West, Pete, you're going to see that it's flipped on its head a little bit, where you have the Nuggets as the number 1 seed. The Sacramento Kings are in the hook of things. And then you have the Lakers and the Warriors down there at the bottom. The Lakers struggling to make the playoffs, and the Warriors fighting injury all year. Coming off a championship season also, it's very difficult in the NBA to maintain that intensity, to maintain that thrive, to keep on going and win more championships. It's more difficult than it's ever been. But the Warriors also have really, really struggled with some health issues and some personal issues with some of their players being out for a long, significant period of time, especially Wiggins. Andrew Wiggins, who's been out for the Warriors for a little bit of time. But if these teams can collect, that's the great news for the fans of the Grizzlies, of the Nuggets, of the teams that have been traditionally at the bottom of the Western Conference for a long time. The really good news is now you're getting to move on up. And the beautiful thing about moving on up is you get home court advantage. You have the number 1, 2, 3, 4 seed, and you get to play at home, and you get to have a team that's supposed to be lesser opponent than yours. Here's the bad news about that currently in this setup. The teams that have fallen, the Los Angeles Lakers and the Golden State Warriors, on any given night, if they're healthy, are easily comparable to the teams that are at the top of this conference right now. So if you're one of the teams up at the top there and you say, okay, we're the number 1 seed, we're the number 2 seed, who did we draw in the playoffs? Oh my God, we just got LeBron James and Anthony Davis. And if healthy, the Lakers are of considerable talent and of considerable ability to make some noise in that Western bracket, although they didn't finish as high as they normally would. But I think that, again, that's problematic if you're the Nuggets, you're the Grizzlies, or you're the Kings, who are really up in that 1, 2, 3 bracket there. I think you're going to have some significant shifting in this, and I think you could see some really big upsets in terms of the entire series. I just don't mean some games. I think you can look at some things where you're going to see number 1 and number 2 seeds get bumped off here. Because if the Lakers are healthy, they're as good as anybody. And if the Lakers get hot like they did at the very end of the season, I don't know if people have been paying attention to the end of the season, but the Lakers got very, very hot at the end of the season. And so those are some of the things that have happened in the NBA in terms of shifting, in terms of demographic. I think it's exciting. I love to see the young players come up into the game. And some of the players that are more experienced, some of the players that are more savvy, they seem to have trouble recently putting up an 82-game season. I mean, if you look in the NBA, I don't know if you'd find one player in the entire NBA that's played 82 games this season. That'd be a trivia question for next week, or we might be off next week. We're going to play this one twice because Pete's going to be in Florida. But I think one of the things that you would do is look into that and see, has there been any player in the NBA this year that's played 82 games? When you look at Anthony Davis from the Lakers, I think you're going to see him in the 50s. When you look at LeBron James, on average, he's missed a bunch of games every single year. It's one of the other reasons I think that you can't consider LeBron James in the GOAT consideration. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later as well, because we opened up one of our earlier shows by saying Larry Bird was the greatest player, the greatest basketball player of all time. And that's a really great discussion. And I think we can have some of that maybe a little bit later today as we center around that. And again, the criteria, the subjectivity of what goes in there. But again, how do I make my decisions as a coach, as a player, as a fan? Those are my decisions. And how do you make your decisions? It often leads people to wind up in completely different places, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think that that's the beauty of basketball, is that people will oftentimes love the game, watch the game, and then have two very, very different opinions of what actually happened in the game. And I think that's one of the greatest things about basketball. So, Pete, do you want to start in the East or you want to start in the West?
Let's start in the East. By the way, Thanos Antetokounmpo played all the games. There's less than 50 players that have played all the games this season.
The big man for the Milwaukee Bucks has played every single game.
That's what this stat line says.
He's the MVP. Then he's the MVP to me, because that matters. I think it matters. It used to matter anyway. When you see people playing 50, 40 games, you're making $9, $10 million a year, and you play half the year. Perhaps the NBA would like to implement this rule. You get paid by the game. And if there's a significant amount of times that you're not going to be there, well, then we're going to take that money and we're going to redistribute it amongst the other players on the team who actually showed up and played. If you can get a serious injury, obviously that is. But sometimes you look and you go, "What's wrong with him?" And they don't know. We're not sure. His back, he's got an ankle sprain. We can just make things up anytime we want and just say, "Yeah, I'm not fit, ready to play." I think some of it also comes into mental health as well of the players, that they travel so much. They're in different cities all the time. the lure to go out at night and be out on off nights is significant. And so you have a situation where mental health is going to be a really significant factor coming in into all of sports you're going to see. But anybody who's out there now trying to train to be a mental health expert in the sports profession or a mental expert in terms of the approach to competition, I think you'll make a lot of money coming up here in a very near future, because that's going to break out and be really, really something significant in sports, is the mental health component and issue. But one of the things the NBA did this year, and they went to I think they've been trying it out for a little bit of time, but this year they went to a 10-game format, 10-team format on each side. And what they had was they had several play-in games. And so they had 4 teams that played in and on each side, and then they became the 7th and 8th seed to go up against the number 1 and 2 seed. And so they're still in the process of determining that, to determine the bracket right now, to see exactly who's going to play the Bucks and who's going to play the Nuggets on the other side, I believe. So you have Oklahoma City is still in one of those toss-up games, and you also have Miami in one of those toss-up games with Chicago. So you have Oklahoma City is playing the Minnesota Timberwolves in what they call the play-in game. And the winner of that will then go in and meet the other 8 teams that are in the playoffs. Same thing happening over on the east side, where Chicago will now play the Atlanta Hawks. The Hawks are already in. They're going to play the Miami Heat. The game is tonight, I believe, and they will be also the winner of that game will play in the round of 8, and the losers will be eliminated. And so they took 10 teams, gave everybody a little bit of an extra chance. Personally, myself, I don't like playoff buys. I don't like teams not being ready to go as soon as the playoffs start. I don't like all of this waiting in between, because right now you don't even know. The Bucks don't even know. And again, this is from a coaching perspective. You're the Milwaukee Bucks. You have the number 1 seed. You don't even know your opponent right now. And there it goes into game preparation. That goes
how do you
into
prep
your
for that?
scouting port. Exactly. That goes into, now you've played these teams a bunch of times, and their scouting and their reports and their technologies are really high tech, but you still have to prepare for the game. And things change in the game of basketball. Somebody gets injured. He's not in. Who took his place? What does he do? How does he impact the game? What is he doing that we might have to be aware of in terms of matchups? Does that create a different matchup problem for us as well? And so those are the things that you have to factor going into this. But I think if you go back into it and you look at the NBA commissioner and you look at some of the other guys that sit up in the room and make decisions about that, you sit there and say, yeah, we're trying to be inclusive. We're trying to include more people. But at the end of the day, what you did was you hurt your number 1 and 2 seeds, because they had to wait longer to see who they were playing. And that put an impact on them. Everybody in the 4 and 5 hole and the 3 and 6 hole, they know who they're playing. They're studying the film. They're getting ready with the reports. They're getting all the data out. Who's shooting it well? Who's not shooting well? Who's passing the ball well and who's not passing the ball well? All of those different things. The amount of technology they have right now is fabulous and unbelievable. But as you go into it, we're sitting here right now and we don't know who they're playing. They're sitting here right now and they don't know who they're playing either. But we can talk about the Bucks certainly are the number 1 seed. They'll play Chicago or Miami. Both of those teams present a problem for the Bucks, because I don't think the Bucks, albeit they're the number 1 seed. If anybody watched what the Celtics did to the Bucks about 2 weeks ago in the end of the regular season, I think you're going to see something that's going to be prevalent in the East Coast, because I think the Celtics and I think the 76ers might be better teams than the Bucks, although the Bucks finished in first place. And why I say that is because the Celtics absolutely dismantled the Bucks in that game and beat them by close to 30, 40 points. It wasn't even close. And I love it when announcers on the game, they were talking about Jason Tatum. They were talking about him struggling a little bit from the 3-point shooting range. As of late, he hadn't been shooting the ball real well. As soon as they finish saying that, he buries like 8 threes. And he goes on this run where the team just went on a run. And when he goes, they go. And the Bucks just didn't have an answer for that. And although they have a lot of talent on the team, I don't like them at center. I don't love them at point either, although Jrue Holiday is tremendous basketball player. I just don't love him as a point guard. And I don't think Brook Lopez as the big man, that's why the Celtics beat him as well, because the Celtics big men are so much more agile, so much faster, quicker. The NBA does a stat where they time every single possession and how long it takes for the team to shoot the ball. And then they average it out over all the year and come up with an average number for the year of how long it takes the entire league to shoot the ball. What that means is that at the number I'm about to divulge to you, which was the number a few years ago, you're looking at a game that's a 24-second clock, and they're not halfway into the shot clock before the ball goes up. That means the players are faster, they're more athletic, they're more agile. And as the bigger Shaquille O'Neal type players or the bigger plodding players got into the game, such as a Brook Lopez from the Milwaukee Bucks, who's their center, I think that slowed the game down for them a little bit because now your center can't interact with you offensively. The number in the NBA several years ago was 11 seconds per possession, and that ball's up, ready to go. By the time some of these gentlemen in the NBA cross half court, it's 8 seconds. So they're just crossing half court to run back down the other side. They're basically high pick and roll screeners, and they're rebounders and defenders on the other side. But they're not a significant, integral part of the offense because the offense moves much quicker than they can. The number now currently in the NBA has gone from 11 to 9, and that is fast. That means that ball's up in the air. As soon as they come down the floor, that ball is up in the air.
So they're not even bothering they're not even bothering to set up an offense then. They're just chucking them up.
It's changed. It's changed, and the NBA has led the way to change. If you want to point the finger at some team, blame, or I don't know if it's blame, but you would credit or blame, depending upon your frame of reference, on the Golden State Warriors, because they absolutely revolutionized offense in the NBA. Steve Kerr and his team, Steve Kerr was an incredible shooter of the basketball. He has one of the most incredible shooters of the basketball, if not the most incredible shooter of the basketball of all time on his team. And so they spread the floor and they create spaces more than they create anything. And so their whole mantra is spacing is offense. Offense is spacing. And so what they want to do is spread the floor out as much as they can, which means they can play Draymond Green at center. They can put Draymond Green, who would normally be a forward in the NBA, they can put him at center because Draymond's faster, can get up and down the floor better, and although he's not a real big offensive threat, he knows how to play within the flow of their offense and what to do, and that's huge for them. And so when you get into that whole scenario, yeah, we had some teams do really, really well, but guess what? We drew the Warriors. The Sacramento Kings have had a great year. They're a great story in the NBA, and they now just went and drew the NBA champions. So I think this first round is going to be really, really interesting. But when we stay in the East, we're going to talk about the Celtics next. Celtics and the Hawks. I think the Hawks are really, really a really talented group, but I think that when they get up against the Celtics, I think the piece of this is that really, really important if you're the team that's in the playoffs right now is to, if you plan on advancing, finish your opponent as fast as you can possibly finish them. So if the series is a 5-game series, you can win it in 3 games. If the series is a 7-game series, you can win it in 7 games. Back in the day, they were all 7-game series, which led the great Moses Malone, my most underrated center of all time, Moses Malone, to go faux, which said they were going to win 4, 4, and 4, and that's exactly what they did. But what's the benefit of that in the first round? The Celtics take care of the Hawks forthwith, then they get to rest a little bit before their next round. They get to rest up some of their players that have been playing a heavy minute load. And so you're looking at Jason Tatum, you're looking at Jaylen Brown. Those guys are playing heavy minute loads right now. So every second that the coach can get rest for them, every second that they can just get a day off or take the team and put them into a situation where you're going to get into the ice bath. You're going to have deep tissue massages. You're going to do stretching and all sorts of different plyometric exercises with them in order to keep the body lithe and movable. And the most important thing right now is not to draw any injuries outside of the basketball forum. You don't want to have an injury in practice. You don't want to have an injury with 2 guys screwing around in the hotel room during film session, and all of a sudden some guy rolls his ankle over. You don't want to have a guy out riding his motorcycle, which a lot of times is prohibited in NBA contracts, most NBA contracts, and then he flies off of his motorcycle. So one of those things that you want to do right now as a coach is you want to stay as healthy as you possibly can. I think the Celtics are in a pretty good shape that way. In that vein, and I think they'll handle the Hawks pretty easily. Move to the next series, the Cavs and the Knicks. I love this series because it's going to be balanced. The Cavaliers are really, really tough. with their scoring and their offensive threats that can really beat you. The Knicks with Brunson and Randall and some of the other guys, they're a tough group too. They're a tough group too, and I think they're really, really going to be with their hands full in terms of the Cavaliers, because the Cavaliers have home court advantage, and the Knicks have been playing really, really good. Coach Tom Thibodeau is a MASCAC coach, also played in the MASCAC for Salem State. And so we'd like to give him a good luck shout, because the Knicks are off and they're ready to go. But I think they're going to have their hands full with the Cavs. I think that's a great series. And then the last one closing in here, you have the Nets are going up from Brooklyn, and they're a really, really interesting story. And they're going up against the 76ers, and that's a tough battle for them because they have Joel Embiid and a ton of other talent on the front line of the 76ers. But what happened with the Nets was all of a sudden Kevin Durant was there, James Harden was there, Kyrie Irving was there. And what we call in the coaching business, we call this addition by subtraction. And what happened was all of those gentlemen, high-paid, highly calibrated, highly recognized and decorated players, all left the team at one time. And everybody in the college basketball world had the funeral song on for the Nets. There they go. They're done. You can't lose Durant, you can't lose Irving, and you can't lose Harden in the space of a year and still survive. Somehow this team is better. Claxton has emerged as a center, and I always liked him when he was with the other group, but they have a group of guys that are playing together and playing for each other. And without a real superstar in the NBA, a lot of times you'll see teams formulate in the old basketball way where they're really just playing for each other, playing good basketball. And I think that's a problem for the 76ers right now. I think that that's going to be a really, really good series. I think the first round in the playoffs is really loaded with some good setups and some good matchups. So if you're a basketball fan, next couple of weeks is going to be really interesting.
Yeah, but you said that about the Nets, that all three of those guys that left are big ego guys. They all had to be the man. And now that they're not, now that there's no the man on the team went back to being the team. And I hate to say this, but you're talking about faster timing and stuff like that in the NBA. Well, now a team is showing up and showing these guys that they might have a shot at going all the way too.
It's a funny thing because I failed chemistry in high school, but I think I do a pretty good job with it in the basketball business, because right now, if you look at the college landscape, if you look at the NBA landscape, chemistry is really underrated right now. People have gotten away from that. And if you look at Princeton and some of the teams that did well, FDU, Tobin Anderson took some of those players from St. Thomas Aquinas College, which is a Division II school, over to FDU, and they were part of his success. One of the gentlemen you saw playing in that round was a Division II transfer and a great story, and he was an unbelievable asset to FDU at that time. So knowing your own players, knowing your own culture, knowing your own established mores and norms is huge for both players and for coaches. And so that's kind of been missed with the NIL and the portal and all the other stuff. And then in the NBA, it becomes really, really difficult with injury, with the travel, with everything going on. I would imagine that season's just like a cauldron where you can just get chewed up at any time, and then your best player can be out for 8-10 games in a row, and now you're cooked. So we need to slide over to the West, Pete, because we're the fastest business on Channel 15, and right now
we're halfway through the show already.
We're moving at a clip that's unbelievable. I've never seen it move like this before. So right now you got the Nuggets. They're waiting on their play-in from OKC in Minnesota. OKC is tough. I think a tougher matchup for the Nuggets than they are. But I'd like to give a little bit of notice to the coach. Back in the day in New York City, Michael Malone is the head coach of the Denver Nuggets, but back in the day, Powell Memorial High School was the big high school in the Catholic High School League, and his dad, Brendan Malone, was a coach back then. He was a living legend back in our area, and he was a great coach as well. And now, just like the Hurley family, this is another situation where I look, having been in this thing my whole life, now I look at Michael Malone, a guy I know that used to try and get up shots at halftime of the basketball games when I was playing in high school. He's a nice 8-9-year-old guy coming out, getting those shots up at halftime. Now he's an NBA head coach, and it was amazing to see them finish first in the Western Conference. And with the level of talent that they have, they could really, really do a great job this year. And for the Malone family, you know, that I've known a good bit, I really, the Catholic High School League in New York, we all stick together. And so it's amazing to watch and amazing to see. But I think that they're going to be able to take care of their business. But again, you finally got the 1 seed and you're drawn into a couple of teams that are hungry and really, really good. So I think that could be something to be on the lookout for. The Grizzlies and the Lakers is a very, very intriguing series. I'm going to pick the Lakers to win that series. The Grizzlies are number 2. They have Ja Morant, a very exciting team, I think, but they've gone under a little bit of controversy lately with the gun situation that Morant got himself into. I don't think that helped them, you know, coming down the end of the season. They seem to be able to have eclipsed that a little bit. But if you look at the Alabama Crimson Tide basketball team in the NCAA tournament, one of their players, Darius Miller, was involved with a situation that involved a gun and a crime. And that stuff doesn't go well in the locker room. That stuff never plays well in the locker room, whether you're an NCAA player, whether you're a CYO player, or whether you've made it all the way to the NBA. So letting your teammates down is never cool. Letting the entire organization and the franchise down is never cool, no matter how cool you and your friends think it is. It's not cool. And so now you look at a situation here where I think the Lakers have a really good shot to beat the Grizzlies because of some of that distraction, but also because you have LeBron James and Anthony Davis forming into shape right now. And they're dangerous, the Lakers. They can be dangerous on any given night. Kings and Warriors, same story. The NBA flipped upside down, and now you have the Warriors in a 6-hole, and the Kings had an unbelievable season, a great season. The people in Sacramento are having parades for the type of season that they've had. An incredible, incredible season for them. Guess what? You just drew the national champs in the first round. Last year's NBA national championship in the first round. Steph Curry and his crew coming in there, and you know what they bring to the table if they shoot well. And so that's going to be a really, really interesting series because if the Warriors shoot well, the Kings are done. If the Warriors get off and take a game from them on home court advantage, if they can split the first 2 games where the Kings have home court advantage, then return back to Golden State with some advantage, I think they really, really have a chance to upset them here. I think that's going to be another upset situation where you might want to keep your eye on. The other thing I wanted to mention today is that people don't pick up on this stuff, but I do somehow as a coach and a guy who's been watching a while. But I think they should look more at the relationship between the coach and Steph Curry, because Steve Kerr was the guy Michael Jordan threw the basketball to when Michael Jordan got double teamed. Steve Kerr was one of the elite shooters in all of college basketball at Arizona, and also he didn't live for all those years in the NBA for his jumping ability. Okay? Steve Kerr cannot jump over a dime, but he is one of the elite shooters of the basketball of all time. I don't think it's a coincidence that him and Steph Curry are in this kind of mind meld now, in the shooting mind meld, where you watch the way that they both approach the game and the way that it's like a coach and a player in complete sync. And I think it's really interesting to watch. I think the Kings got big problems there. This next series, I think, is going to be the best one in the West Coast. You have the Suns and the Clippers, and the Clippers have had a tremendous season, but they're both looking at situations where, is Kawhi Leonard healthy for the Clippers, and is Kevin Durant going to be healthy for the Phoenix Suns? Because that was one of the pickups late in the year. Phoenix wanted to add to that cachet of great players they have with Chris Paul and Devin Booker, and they said, man, if we can get Kevin Durant, this is going to be unbelievable. But then you saw Kevin Durant on layup line driving in, and all of a sudden he rolled his ankle over, and out for a couple of weeks he was. And so what that impacted was their ability to build chemistry in the short amount of time that they had it to build. So they picked up Kevin Durant in the midseason. You had maybe 40 games in order for him to get a real good feel for the offense, for what his teammates do well, for what the whole stick is on defense. What do we want to do as an organization? What do we want to do as a team? And in the NBA, that's different for every single organization. It's different for every single team. So all of the time that he had to acclimate, all of the time that he had to flow with the organizational culture was interrupted by injury. And so Phoenix going into this series right now with the Clippers, if Kawhi Leonard is healthy, I think that's a problem for them a little bit. And I think people look at Phoenix as a team that might be able to do it all and get going. I think Phoenix needs to change their focus offensively a little bit because they have DeAndre Ayton inside, and he doesn't get the ball enough. Every NBA player in the world doesn't get the ball enough. But DeAndre Ayton is a unbelievably talented player. And I think if they just shifted some of their touches, some of their shot attempts to favor inside a little bit more, I think that helped Phoenix a lot, especially if Durant's not going to be able to go, especially if Durant is going to be able to stick. You know, if he stays and he plays well, they're a force. If he's going to be in and out or not effective, I would go back to the last year's series when the Celtics played the Nets and the way that the Celtics defended Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant had a lot of trouble in that series. Kevin Durant doesn't move as well as Kevin Durant did when he was younger. And the Celtics picked up on that. And they were in his shirt most of the night of that series. And he really, really struggled down there. So in Phoenix, he's out in the west side a little bit where the defenses aren't as clutch and grab. That might help him a little bit. But if you stick somebody in his shirt right now, it's really limiting his effectiveness. And I think they did that last year with the Celtics. And sometimes what happens is the word gets out. Other teams look at a film and say, wow, look at the way Tatum played him. Wow, look at the way Jaylen Brown had him. Look at what they did over here when they forced him into this type of coverage. And once that word gets out, then everybody starts doing the same thing. It's like a guy who can't hit a curveball in baseball. Once that word gets out, he's the best fastball hitter in the business. But once that word gets out, my God, he can't hit a curveball. All you see is curveballs.
Yep.
Once the word gets out on Durant that he can't get around anymore and he doesn't move as well as he used to, you're going to see a whole lot of guys sitting up in his shirt and not in what we call help and recover situations as deeply. Help and recover means my man doesn't have the ball, so I'm helping the man who does have the ball. I'm in help defense, okay? But if you're guarding Kevin Durant, your help and recover relationship needs to be more prone towards recover than it is towards help. Because if you get too far off of him, he's going to shoot it, and he's the best shooting big man in the league right now. And so that's where you're really going to have a problem. If you don't get off him, Chris Paul's going to get at the rim and lock up with DeAndre Ayton and some of the other great players, Booker, that they have. So that kind of triumvirate has always been successful in the NBA. You know, where you had Magic Johnson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and James Worthy. You know, you had Larry, you had Kevin McHale, and you had Robert Parrish. You know, you have that three-headed hydra, so to speak, in basketball, especially in the NBA. That's how it really works. Then you fill in with your role players and some of the other stuff, and that's what makes the day go. But at the end of the day, the NBA is a superstar league, and you need somebody who's going to drive that bus, somebody who can take the ball, get it to the rim, and score. That's why people underestimate how great Carmelo Anthony was as a player in the NBA, because he lasted all those years, but he was impossible to guard. He was really, really difficult to stop. And so that's what I think is in a great player also offensively is can you be stopped? Can you stop this player? And right now, I think there's a number of players in the NBA that have that kind of open court game where if you don't do something different and you play them one-on-one, if you play Tatum one-on-one all night long, he's going to score 40 points on you the way he's going right now. And he can get to the rim. He's what they call a three-level scorer. He can take the ball to the basket. He can shoot the three. He can get into mid-range. He can shoot the ball from any place. And once that occurs and the team starts to really feel him as their guy, as their alpha, that's when you're really, really going to see, you know, that's when the team takes over and really starts to kick into drive in the NBA. When they have that superstar and all of the other players are in there in support. And what we do sometimes is you talk about it, if you look at it from a coaching perspective, you can think about it in terms of the United States military as well. In the United States military, there's a misconception. The misconception is that everybody gets a gun, everybody goes to the front line, and everybody gets to fight. That's a misconception. The misconception is revolved around numbers. It's just numerical. 20% of the military goes up to fight. 80% is in support of that 20%. Same thing in basketball. 20% score the ball. The other 80% are in support of that scoring of the basketball. And yes, you do score sometimes. Yes, you do have opportunity for you to do it. But when you look at a game, and you can take an NBA game, you can take a college basketball game. I'll give you a college basketball game as an example. You're going to run into about 75, 80 shot attempts in that game. There will be 75 or 80 of them in the game on average. Some teams are a little faster. They might get up 90 shots. Some teams are a little slower. They might be in the 60s somewhere. But now go into your personnel. Let's say you're coaching, Pete, and you say, okay, I got 80 shots. How many do you want Jason Tatum to take?
Oh, at least a quarter.
Right? 25% of those shots have to go to Jason Tatum.
Yeah.
Now, it's a basketball. It's got to get passed around. We got to move it over to Jason so he can take all those shots.
You also got to get him to a spot where he gets open to take a shot.
Got to get him into the spot. You got to get him open. That's what coaches do. But if the coach's vision isn't supported by the other 80% of those guys, Jason Tatum doesn't get the ball on the spot. Jason Tatum doesn't get the screen that he needs in order to get open. And so those are the things that go into the building of a basketball team because everybody wants to be an offensive star.
And herein why I said before, and I'll say it again, the Nets are so much better now.
I couldn't agree more with you, Pete. I couldn't agree more with you. Rookie of the Year, Paolo Banchero, Orlando Magic. I think without question, the former Duke player, he's going to get it. I'm going to go, now that you told me Giannis Antetokounmpo played in every single game, I'm going to clearly pick him as our in-the-zone MVP, and then I'm going to go with Banchero as our Rookie of the Year.
So they sat him down for one game, but he played every other game.
Okay. 81
Still
games.
give it. I'll still give it to him.
That's okay with
They
me.
sat him down to rest him for the playoffs.
Well, one game is out of 82 is different than 52 out of 82.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely.
And
absolutely.
So I'm if we can find somebody else that played better than him, that played 82, we'll give it to them. But right now, I think we're going to load it up with him, Pete, because I think he's had an unbelievable season. Next week, we are going to be on hiatus because Pete is heading down to Florida. I hope he has a great time down there. The weather cooperates with everything they're doing down there. But you'll get to see this show twice. When we come back next week, we're going to actually have our NCAA, NBA mock draft. We're going to actually do the show where we take all the college players and we put them onto college teams. And we're going to talk about a little bit of those few guys that we really like in this NBA draft coming up. And a lot of people aren't really looking at them. And just for the next 6 minutes, we're going to take a couple of these players that we're going to talk about because I'm not a big fan of the G League. I'm not a big fan of the pro leagues that they've set up here. You're
not a fan of a developmental league?
In the last 20 minutes. I would
Okay.
be in favor of a developmental league if it was exactly that. Get them the same contract that the NBA has. Get them on television so people can watch them. Very difficult to watch G League games or to even see their players. I don't know any of the guys that really coach in the league. You don't know a whole lot of the players in the league.
Okay.
And so it becomes difficult. And when they're talking about the top 6 players in the NBA draft this year, and 4 of them will come from leagues alternate other than the NCAA, I think that has it's like the new kid in town by the Eagles. Everybody's talking about the new kid in town. And when you have Trace Jackson Davis, who's been at Indiana for 4 years and been an NBA, NCAA, incredible talent and player, I think you got to talk about him a little bit too. When you have Zach Edey, the 7'4", 285-pound man-child out of Purdue, I think you got to look at him as an NBA player because Yao Ming was about that size and he had a very good NBA career.
Yep.
I'm not in favor of the real tall, thin NBA players, but 7'4", 285, I mean, that's incredible. So I'd like to give him a look as well. I want to send out some good news to Blue Devil Nation and the Duke Blue Devils. It appears that their big man, Kyle Filipowski, will return and not enter his name into the NBA draft. And so I think that's huge for the Duke Blue Devils. I think that's incredible for them. That would probably elevate them to number 1 in a top 25 poll next year. We're going to talk about a way too early poll for us as well later on in this segment. But as we go through this, Filipowski returning to Duke is big news because what I think is trending, you see this with, there's a gentleman at George Washington by the name of James Bishop, and you're seeing this in some other leagues. Rather than players take on that 5th year and go someplace else, they're actually taking the 5th year and returning to their other school that they were at all those years. And I think that's cool. I think that they should take all those years because what happens is the minute you transfer, you're no longer one of the players that they're counting as their all-time leading scorer. You're not one of the players that they're looking at as a 1,000-point scorer. You're not one of the players they're looking at most likely to enter into their Hall of Fame when all your playing time is done. So I say to all of these young men, make sure the grass is always greener on the other side. I get that. But make sure with the NIL, obviously, that's a way of making sure, obviously. But if your career means a lot to you, go back and look at some of the players that left their current teams this year and could have returned, and then see how they did at their other schools. And did they have the type of career that they could have had they stayed at that other school, their original school? And what I think you'll find out is they probably made some money in the process, significant amount of money too. That's important. But what I think they'll find out is that they upset the course of their career as well, and they lost their ability to set college records at the school they were at, because that's where the records were. It's difficult to set a record at a school in 1 year when you transfer over there for 1 year. And so I think that's part of it as well. I'm seeing a little bit of a shift this year where some of the players that have the opportunity to do that fifth year and to go out, they're staying at their schools, and I like that. I think that's good. I would like to also mention at this time, when you see Ivy League players that are leaving on a fifth year and they're looking to go out, a lot of people might say, why would you leave Yale, Harvard, and Columbia, the greatest schools in the world? The Ivy League doesn't allow them to come back. So when you see that fifth-year player going out and playing at another school, and it's an Ivy League player, no, they didn't have the opportunity to go back. Everybody else has the opportunity to go back. The Ivy League has a different rule, and that's why you're seeing the preponderance. They didn't change on the COVID either. They didn't change it. They just left it. And so some of their guys were in school, had extra years. That's why you're seeing all the Ivy League players littered all over the place. And so we're coming up to the conclusion of the show here, Pete. I don't know how much time we have left. I did want to...
14 minutes you got. You got plenty of time.
Oh, we're 14 minutes.
Yep.
Beautiful, beautiful. So I did want to go into the draft just a little bit then and talk about some of that, because where we're at right now in terms of NBA general managers, in terms of all of the information that they input into all of what they take, it's really an important job in the NBA. And one of the things that's hurt the NBA, I think, especially when it comes to, generally it's on June 25th, what they call NBA Draft Day. When you get to that day, this is where the mistakes are being made. This is where the problems are. And one of the problems that you have is that they're not going out and doing their homework in the same way that they used to do. Actually showing up in the gym, actually showing up at the arenas to watch these gentlemen play, turning on the television during the regular season to watch them play. You can look at a mock draft from somebody and they'll have some good input in there and they'll have some good data in there. And you can also go to Portsmouth at the end of the year tournaments and watch them compete against each other. But I think what's the missing piece here is that the NBA, for whatever different reason, I think because technology might have taken over a little bit, the NBA now has gone away from more in-person scouting of the college players. They've gone away from being actually at the arena, watching the player in their confines and watching the player with the players that are around them, their college coaches, their assistant coaches, able to do their reconnaissance work on the prospect as well. Is he a great guy? Is he a really good teammate? Is he somebody that shows up on time? Is this somebody that we can count on to represent our brand in a very positive way? And so I think that part of that, the job of NBA scout, is a good one, because you're out there watching great players all the time and you get to put in your opinion and calculations and different things like that. But the NBA started to cut back on those positions dramatically, and guys that are NBA scouts now that have been around a really long time are on the wane, and there is fewer and fewer. And so there's two types of scouts that you have in the NBA. The first type of scout you have is an actual basketball scout. He will go out and scout the opponents. He will go out 3 days in front of the team, and if the team, will pick one, the Celtics are playing the Hawks on Wednesday, he's going to see the Hawks play on Friday, and he's going to go to the game 3-4 days in front of the team. He's never actually with the basketball team until he returns home to make his report to the team. So he'll stay out on the road for a couple of games, and he'll do his scouting report at the game, put it all together in his hotel room, and either send it back to the head coach or actually bring it back to the team, deliver it, and then his involvement from that piece on is dependent upon who the head coach is and how much involvement he wants from his scout. Some guys really, really are into that stuff, and other coaches not so much. Other coaches are more driven towards, I need to worry about what we do more than I need to worry about what our opponent does. And that's kind of where it goes. The other scout is the talent scout. That's the scout that goes to the NCAA games, and that's the guy who watches all of the college players that are going to be drafted in the late first round, in the second round, and that's where you find the diamond in the rough. That's where you find the great player that other people weren't focused on, that other people didn't think would equate to a good NBA player, and that's where you find that. And so it's really about hustle, determination, but I think it's also about the eye. Certain guys have a really good eye for this stuff, and other guys don't. And some guys get paid to do it and don't have a good eye, and other guys get paid to do it and they have a really good eye. And you see that in their franchises. You see that in the drafting. So the advanced scouting on the basketball side of it, obviously very, very important. But the scouting on the personnel side, I think, is really, really important. I say this all the time. If I was an NBA owner, I would have general managers. I would have all of the assistant coaches, everything like they do. I'd have advanced scouts, but I'd also have a private detective, a private investigator who worked with the team, who would actually, before we invested $25 million into this young man, they're going to come in and tell us everything we don't know about the young man. They're going to come in and tell us all of the things that are obstacles to drafting this young man. And when you put all of that together, now you can look at this thing and say, because character matters, especially when you're around each other for 82 games, 46 flights, 45 bus rides. You're around each other all the time. And if you see what happened between Rudy Gobert and the kid Anderson on his team, where Anderson was verbally into it with him, and Rudy Gobert's big 6'10" guy, he got tired of listening to it, and you wind up seeing where one teammate struck another in the middle of the game, in the course of the game. He reached out and punched his own teammate right in the chest in the course of the game. And you can see that because that's what happens in the cauldron. That's what happens. And what good coaches do, what good general managers do, they know how to keep the heat down on the burner. They know, because everyone's in the cauldron. Everyone's in a pot that's boiling. Everybody's in it. That's athletics. That's sports. Pro level, you're in the cauldron. Okay? And what the job of the general manager and the coach is to know, just like a mom or a great chef or somebody who's in a kitchen anywhere who knows how to handle any kind of food, you got to have the right temperature. You got to have the burner at the right temperature. And so if you have your burner too low on a basketball team, they're not going to vibrate.
They're not going to be competitive.
They're not going to compete, and the burner is just going to be very, very, it's a simmer. It's a simmer. And then if you got your burner on the way, way high up, now you're going to boil over the pot.
It's going to explode.
Exactly. And so that's basketball in a nutshell. Everybody's in the cauldron. The great coaches know how to control the thermostat. The great coaches know how to control the dial that's on the burner. Because sometimes it's a day off. Sometimes it's about giving those two guys $100 and saying, go have dinner together. I need you to work this out. Sometimes it's a meeting in a room, a boardroom with a bunch of tables and chairs, and everybody comes in and says, okay, if we can't work this out, one of you is going to have to go. Or do you guys want to try and work this out? And a lot of times when you get into situations where two players are acrimonious with each other on the same team, that's like lead for a team. That's like adding bags onto a team that's trying to run. It weighs it down. It makes it heavy. Every interaction that the team has makes it difficult. Guys passing each other in practice, they don't speak. They won't look at each other. They don't make eye contact.
Guys forced to choose sides.
Right. And, that's the worst part. That's the worst part.
Yeah.
Because Anderson has his guys and Gobert's got his guys, and now you see how that splits up really quickly.
Yep.
You even saw some of that in the interaction in the fight. When Gobert reaches out and hits him, two other guys jump to his defense and go after Gobert. Right there in that moment, you saw that division. Right there, you saw how the cauldron's too hot.
Yep.
How the cauldron's too high, the burner's too high. And Rudy Gobert is about as mellow as a person, I think. I've seen him interviewed. He's very gentlemanly usually. So to take him out of that vibration, to take him out of that mindset, I would imagine that you probably had to say something to him pretty significant. And that matters as well. We say this to our players all the time. Communication with each other matters. How we speak to each other matters. And so you can't be out there going, well, I'm just trying to help him, and then call him a dog in the same sentence. You can't do that because that doesn't help anybody. That's where positive vibration on teams is what makes them win. Positive vibration on organizations is what helps them to win. Because once you cross over that line, that's the negativity line. That's the downward descent into last place. And you might win a couple of games, but that locker room's awful. You might win a couple of games here and there. You might even make the playoffs, but that locker room is absolutely awful. And that's part of the game of basketball, is that there's more to it than just the dribbling, the shooting, and the rebounding. There's so much more to it. And the word that you used earlier in the show, Pete, was chemistry.
Yeah.
Chemistry. NBA teams, it's so hard to keep chemistry because everybody gets paid. And now they're finding that out with the NIL. And so when everybody gets paid to do something, why be a good team player?
You just want to get paid.
Just shoot the ball every time you touch it.
Yep.
And then you go in front of an arbitrator, and he says, oh, well, he averaged 16 points a game. That's only 4 less than LeBron James. Give him $20 million. And that's how the whole thing works.
Right.
And so you have a system that's built up in the NBA that's built to be divisive. Possibly why they change coaches and change operations as much as they do, because you're in an untenable situation. You're in an unwinnable situation.
Can't fault the players, got to fault the coach.
And that's why coaches get fired.
Yep.
Because there's 15 players and there's one coach. It's much easier to remove the one coach than it is the 15 players. When very, very often, the next coach is going to come in and have the same problems because the team, the problem is in the root. The problem is in the root. That tree's still going to fall on your house because you didn't take the tree out. You took another tree out in the yard, but you left the tree closest to your house. That's going to fall on your house right next to you.
Yep.
If you leave all the players there.
Yep.
They change the players from time to time too, but not with the ferocity that they change the coaches. The coaches, now you're going to see a bunch of NBA guys. There'll be 5 or 6 guys go out the door very, very shortly here now that the season's over. 50-something coaches on the NCAA level. Division I. Division II had a bunch. Division III even has a bunch. By the end of it, there'll probably be over 100 jobs on less than 1,000 total jobs that will vacate in 1 year. And so here at In the Zone, we like to be solution-driven as well, too. You know, so we're going to also keep in vein with the last 2. We gave you 2 songs last week. All right, we're going to give you 2 more this week to conclude. And I did turn on Channel 15 this week, Pete, and I saw you and another guy playing only music on the station.
Yep.
And it was different songs and everything. It was fascinating. It was unbelievable. And so as somebody who loves music, I rolled up on that, and I really thought that was cool. Okay, so here we go. We're going to give you 2 new songs that we think that are fabulous. You probably haven't heard them, but we're going to give them to you now. And we think that they're something that you might want to catch during the week. You can punch up anything on your YouTube now and listen to it. Okay? First one out, Marshall Tucker Band, Pete. This Old Cowboy. This ain't going to be the first time this old cowboy spent the night alone. All right? So we're going to go out with This Old Cowboy by the Marshall Tucker Band. And this is a song that's really off the beaten path, but I love it. It's called You Don't Know Me by Ben Folds and the Ben Folds Group. And he actually does it with Regina Spektor. If you want to catch that version, it's really, really cool. Now, how much time we got left, Pete? Couple of minutes?
About 2 minutes.
2 minutes. I'm going to close with this. I'm the absolute biggest Bruce Springsteen fan. I have been at over 120 Bruce Springsteen shows in my life. Bruce Springsteen is out on tour right now. I was all set to go to Mohegan and probably to Albany. My wife doesn't know about the Albany one yet, but they canceled both of those shows. And my wife is the reason I want to bring this up, because way back in the day when we were dating, we were going out on one of our first dates, and I wanted to make a really good impression. I had seen Springsteen several times in the past, and me and a buddy of mine got third row tickets in Brennan Byrne Arena to see Springsteen. And now we take both of the young ladies we took wound up being our future wives. So it was a good ticket. It was a really good ticket. And out comes my wife, gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous, in a blue dress, and she is the devil with the blue dress on. We're going into the third row, and this is when Bruce Springsteen is dancing in the dark, and he's bringing different young ladies up onto the stage to dance with during Dancing in the Dark. One of the most famous was Courtney Cox, who got brought up on stage, got noticed, and wound up going into Friends. Okay? But this is my life, Pete. This isn't the way it works. And so this is why I'm putting out an appeal to Mr. Bruce Springsteen himself, because this is what went down that day. The Brennan Byrne Arena had just opened up. We were in the third row. Security had done an amazing job. So for the entire of the show, we got to sit in our seats, look up in the third row, and watch this amazing display of rock and roll. As the encores start, security lost control of the place. And out from the back come about 2,000 heathens. They had to be from New Jersey. They had to be. And so now the barricades break, and we now have to get up and stand on our chairs so that we can see, because the place is now flooded with people. This young gentleman proceeds to climb up on the back of my future wife's chair. And as Bruce Springsteen is singing Dancing in the Dark, he's looking right down at my wife in her blue dress, and he's, according to just about everybody there, about to bring her on stage and dance in the dark with her. But this guy climbs up the back of her chair and starts to collapse the chair, and she starts to go down. She grabs my shoulder and hangs on a little bit, and I hit this guy with a left hand that knocks him into next Tuesday. He goes down, crumpled onto the back of our chair. The statute of limitations is over on this now, so I can tell the rest of the story. He goes crumpled down into the chair, but at that moment, Springsteen kind of looks at the scuffle, and he moves away from us and grabs another girl to bring her up on stage to dance. So for the last 35 years, Pete, I've been listening to the fact that my wife could have been Courtney Cox at Friends if I wasn't so aggressive. And I swear to you, Pete, he was going to bring her up on stage. And so now my message at the end of In the Zone to Bruce Springsteen himself, my guy, I love him since 1976. When you get back to Mohegan, you need to send me 2 tickets. You need to bring my wife down into the orchestra, and you need to dance with her during Dancing in the Dark, because I can't take it anymore. We're in the zone. We won't be back next week, but we're going to be back the week after that, and then we're going to have the draft. I hope everybody has a great week. Love all of you. Stay well, and we'll be in touch.